Although Ripple has been engaged in a long, drawn-out battle with the US Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, it hasn't stopped the company from expanding into international markets and new business avenues. Ripple continues to be on an aggressive footing when it comes to making fresh investments to grow within the crypto space. The Ripple CEO, Brad Garlinghouse, recently stated that it's looking to use its cash reserves to the tune of about $1 billion in expanding the company's offerings. While speaking at the Dubai FinTech Summit, Garlinghouse said that the company is looking to grow and become more than just a payments platform or a liquidity provider. To quote Brad Garlinghouse, he says, "I think what will be next is certainly something Ripple thinks about. We started with enterprise-based cross-border payments. We talked about there being 4 primitive pieces to blockchain-based technologies: liquidity, compliance, custody, and tokenization. And Ripple really aspires to be more than just that liquidity and cross-border payments. I think that you'd expect that we will expand into some of those other areas, either organically or through acquisition." Now, to me, that sounds very bullish. Crypto has been an interesting space in the last few months, and specifically more so for Ripple and their lawsuit with the SEC. And I think it's pretty bullish to see that Ripple are considering expanding beyond just liquidity and ODL and basically looking at, maybe custody, maybe tokenization, which is a massive piece that not many people are really kind of getting into at the moment, but something that I think will be on the growth side of things, and compliance, which I think with everything that's going on with the SEC, they're really fighting for. So I think ultimately, I think this is a pretty big move for Ripple, and I think it's going to mean long term that Ripple are here to stay on the global stage and really be one of the key players in the future for finance and fintech. So pretty bullish, I think, on that one. I mean, they mentioned spending $1 billion of the company's reserves on acquiring, companies that are going to help them kind of migrate into some of those other areas. And I think custody will be a pretty big one. Tokenization is absolutely massive, specifically when we start thinking about tokenization of like real estate and things like that, for example, on a global level is absolutely massive. So a lot of funding could be provided to Ripple just on those two things alone. Compliance is complex, but it'd be great to see them kind of moving into that space as well. And yeah, I mean, let me know what your thoughts are on that in the comments down below. Now, the Ripple CEO added that the company will consider expanding into markets with crypto-friendly jurisdictions. And he says, I think that we'll look at making acquisitions in markets that are friendly to these technologies. You had representations from the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. You had representations from Switzerland. These are countries that are providing the clarity for entrepreneurs to invest and that allow a company like Ripple that is larger to invest, Brad Garlinghouse had said in Dubai. So, Garlinghouse also added that the company currently has more than $1 billion on its balance sheet, which it plans to deploy both organically internally, but also through acquisitions, right? Inorganically through acquisitions as well. I think that's pretty big, and I think we're going to see a lot more from Ripple in the coming kind of days and weeks. Now, the SEC on the back foot, so we did see that whilst the resolution of Ripple versus the SEC, or more specifically the SEC versus Ripple, because the SEC brought the case to Ripple, and as that kind of comes closer, and we'll talk more about that in a second, 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗔𝗥𝗘 co-founder Bob Raz also took to Twitter to share his thoughts on the SEC's approach to crypto regulations. And as per Raz, the SEC is already on the back foot of the crypto industry, feeling the ripple effects of the SEC's aggressive approach to the crypto regulations. According to him, the SEC has been in its weakest position that it has ever been in. And I have to totally agree there. I've seen, the SEC through corruption regulation and various other things just make absolute blunders no end when it comes to this particular case, but many of the others as well. And it's almost like they thought that Ripple would just fold, pay them, and they would get on with things. And there definitely seems to be a lack of understanding over the crypto space, at least at some top level. And the puppets that are, 𝗕𝗘𝗪𝗔𝗡𝗧𝗦 and the rest of these kind of morons at the top, that it seems to be very, very clear that they are either being paid to be this bad, or they are just generally that incompetent. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comments down below. But there seems to be a lot going on in the US that just doesn't make sense, unless, of course, people are being manipulated and the strings are being pulled, of course, to push things in one specific direction. Now, when they say it's in the weakest position, I totally agree. He also lashed out at the SEC for treating cryptocurrencies as securities and not building or working on building a regulatory framework to address the innovative asset class. And this is a misunderstanding that a lot of these dinosaurs in these senior positions really just fail to understand. They seem to think that the existing laws work for this new asset class, and they simply do not. You cannot kind of have these daily morphing assets. You can't have it as a commodity on one day and a security on the other. You need to actually build a framework that actually makes a lot more sense to this innovation, and not try to just apply dinosaur old tactics into trying to kind of like spoon or kind of couple everything together and call everything a security, which is currently what the SEC are trying to do, is basically say that all cryptocurrencies are securities, and without actually understanding why they are not, and why they do not actually work when applying the Howey test at all levels. And it's critically important that we understand that some assets can be under the current laws considered securities only from one very specific point of view. Yet if you were started to think of it from a different lens, or look through it from a different lens, it can not be a security. It means that a new framework is really required. Something cannot both be a security and not be a security at the same time, depending on certain factors. I think it would make more sense for a proper regulatory framework to be employed and implemented for this new asset class, which is why we see things going on in various different jurisdictions around the world where people are working towards such a thing, whereas the US seem to be really kind of taking a step backwards and are going to basically do themselves long-term damage if they do not get on board with where the future is going. So as much as these dinosaurs don't want to welcome the new world in, I think they're going to have no choice at some point in the future. But let me know what you think about the regulatory state of the US in the comments below, and whether you agree with what Ras was saying on Twitter. But let's go into some of the other things that we've seen in the space before we start talking about the price action of the charts, because this is actually really bullish. So Brad Garlinghouse is confident that we'll hear a decision from the courts within weeks, not months, due to the release of the Hinman emails. So this basically tells us that there is something very significant in those emails. And the fact that they will be released soon, just a few weeks away now, it gives us confidence to believe that whatever's in those emails is so damaging to the SEC that the court will have no choice but to rule in favor of Ripple. And for Brad Garlinghouse to be that confident, I think really does make me bullish on XRP. So let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think we are just weeks away now and not months, or do you think things are going to get dragged out even further? I'm actually with Brad on this one, and I've been saying it for a little while now, that the uncertainty around this case, with how long it has been going on, the fact that these Hinman emails are going to be released is actually going to basically push XRP's price to levels that maybe a lot of people have just been in denial about for a very long time. Now, I'm not going to be jumping onto the bandwagon of thinking that XRP is going to 589 or anything like that, or $10,000 right away. I don't think those things are realistic. What I do think, though, is that there's going to be a significant fallout from this emails and from the decision of the courts, right? If they do rule in favor of Ripple, then I do think we're going to see very significant surge in terms of XRP price action. So let's jump into that. Okay, so we've been talking about a pump to the upside for a while. We've kind of seen that unfold already, okay, because we did have this setup here But it looks like we just got rejected on the upper trend of our parallel channel. So basically, we are still moving down. So we are looking for a small retracement here from a technical standpoint, but it's nothing terribly too major in my opinion. So we can be testing maybe these lows again, coming into that fair value gap before we launch. But I think as time progresses here and the fundamental side of what's going on with the SEC and Ripple, and if we do get those emails come out, I think there's very limited time here to see major retracement. So I'm not expecting moves beyond this. If we were to be lucky enough to get this fast tracked, we talk about 39 cent, and after that, realistically speaking, I think we've got a big shot to the upside. Now if we take a look at this on a kind of grander scale, we do see ourselves with some interesting kind of structures. At the moment we look at this as a WXYXZ, but it's possible that this is no longer going to be a WXYXZ, and we actually ended up with, you know, a quick correction here and another big move to the upside, where we could see well over $1 in the next potential moves. Let me actually go show you where that currently would sit based on these current structures. And of course, these current structures are going to adapt and change if we were to see a case come to an end. You can see here it's 93 cent, possibly push up to that 1.382, and if we do that, then we might obviously be watching out for the 120. You hit the 120 and things here are going to change very, very quickly, and it's going to basically be very impulsive, I would have thought, to the upside. So there's a lot of technical stuff that really it cannot be applied under the fundamental changes that we would see from the lawsuit coming to a closure. So as much as we want to look at this and we want to kind of say to ourselves, look, we can move down and we can bounce up and we can hit these high levels of around $1 or whatever, I think it's important to reflect on actually a lot of this stuff is going to be thrown out of the window when that case comes to an end. There's not so much history here that's going to tell us what's going to happen next. All we can do is make sure that we are ready for whatever rocket is going to launch to the upside. Now, why do I think there's going to be a rocket? Well, ultimately, we saw this from way back in 2020, right? Let me just bring this up, okay? So this is the damage that was done when the lawsuit was dropped right here. About $13 billion worth of damage, I think, was wiped off their market cap. Maybe more. I can't remember the exact number. If anyone does know, let me know in the comments below. But it was a significant amount. It was a stupid amount of damage to retail investors globally on the back of Jay Clayton's lawsuit that was filed on his last day in office, right? The kind of bullshit that someone does just to kind of piss off people, in my opinion. Someone who should just be in jail for that kind of bullshit, because that should never have happened, right? Anyway, nonetheless, it happened, and the SEC have lived up to their words of not protecting retail investors by creating billions of dollars worth of damage, right? We all know this. But my point here is, this is how fast you can move down, okay, given those kind of situations. Now, this is a weekly chart. This is not like an hourly chart or anything like that. This particular move right here is 77%. We lost 77% of the price action, okay, within just what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days, right? So very, very fast we moved down. And I think we're going to see something very similar, but in reverse. But it will be significantly more compounded due to the fact that we'd had a lackluster kind of bullish market and we had a long time for accumulation. I reckon what we're going to be looking for is a lot of exchanges relisting XRP because they've got clarity over what it is or what it isn't. And we'll see a significant surge to the upside with significant FOMO coming in on Ripple XRP. I reckon we'll be pushing up very, very significantly. Don't get me wrong, there'll be little moves to the downside from time to time, and nothing moves in straight lines, but a very significant move to the upside is what I would expect to occur when we do find that Ripple win. Now, if it ends in settlement, then, you know, we might be kicking that can down the road a little bit longer, at least until you get the settlement. But once that news breaks, I think the same scenario, we have that move to the upside. I think there's very little chance that the SEC will win, and therefore I'm not even going to bother kind of talking about that in any kind of shape or detail whatsoever, because essentially I think the outcome is going to be the same regardless. But the only way I see that this is coming to an end now is that the SEC lose, Ripple win, and or there's a settlement, right? It's one of those two options really, Ripple win or settlement. And I don't think Ripple will want to settle. I think what we'll find is that Ripple will win, and it'll be appealed, of course, by the SEC, and all that nonsense will drag on a little bit. But I think that at that point there, moonshot will occur, and we'll see some very significant green candles on XRP's price action as FOMO really kicks in for the people who were missing the boat. So when I take a look at everything that's going on here, and I'm thinking, okay, we can have a nice little correction here. We've got a few weeks left for accumulation if we haven't, and if we're not ready in our positions and comfortable with the amount of XRP that we have, and then we've got some time here, a few weeks or so, to kind of get into positions, and I'm looking for anything lower than 40 cent essentially at this point. I think as time progresses, it becomes quite difficult. If we do come down lower than 40 cent, then we've got to be in that DCA mode, in my opinion. You know, I think maybe actually that's a bit generous. 42 cents probably a better place to be aiming. 42. Yeah, I'm going to actually go out on the limb and say 43.2. That's going to be the range. I would say right here, this line, 43.30. This one, I think, you know, we can probably come and test this around. As soon as we go down lower than 43.3, DCAing is kind of where my mind is at. Now, I'm not a financial advisor. I can't give you financial advice. All I can do is kind of to explain how I would approach this market. I'm looking at this as previous resistance turning into support levels. So 43.3 could be a good area to be thinking about maybe DCAing. But, you know, consult your own financial advisor if you have access to one, or do your own research and dig deep into your own research on the side of XRP and all that kind of stuff. But at the moment, the way I look at this, it's better to be in a position and out of or be in a position rather than not be in a position. And if I'm not in a position, I'm thinking 43.30 or lower is a good place to start DCAing into this. We say we've got a few weeks, so we could come down lower. We could be hitting less than 40 cent, of course, but that's the idea of DCA, is the dollar cost average slowly over time. So as price comes down, you're lowering your entry price over time. So, you know, 43.3 to be safe. I would rather be in a position than not in a position, and all of that kind of good stuff. So I'm going to leave this video there. Just some of my final thoughts kind of, you know, on XRP and where I think things are going. I think ultimately we're going to see a very significant surge to the upside, maybe around that $5.89, for example. Something like that could be pretty achievable in my mind. Let me know what your thoughts are. How high do you think things are going to go once Ripple win? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this useful, smash the like button. If you're new, subscribe, and don't forget to join us down in Discord, which is linked in the description below. Until the next one though, guys, have a fantastic day.
We are not financial advisors. None of what we have communicated verbally or in writing here should be considered as financial advice. It is not. Do your own research before investing in any digital asset or affiliate offers, and understand that investing in any crypto is risky. If you do, you need to be prepared to lose your entire investment. This video is for information and entertainment purposes only. All our videos are strictly personal opinions. Please make sure you do your own research and never take our opinions for financial guidance. There are multiple strategies, and not all strategies fit all people. Our videos are not financial advice.